Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Erica Keswin, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Florida, and today we're going to be talking about your book, The Retention Revolution. And in the modern age of disruptive technologies and AI and just this post-COVID world, we're grappling constantly with what does modern leadership look like? How do we attract and retain the best talent in an ever-shifting world of work? And so this is really what we're going to try to unpack and discuss together today as we discuss your book. As we get started, I wanted to share Erica's bio with everybody. Erica Keswin is a best-selling author, internationally sought-after speaker, and workplace strategist. Her first two best-selling books, Bring Your Human to Work, 10 Surefire Ways to Design a Workplace That's Good for People, Great for Business, and Just Might Change the World, and Rituals Roadmap, the human way to transform everyday routines into workplace magic, were widely discussed in media outlets like Good Morning America, MSNBC, Live Well with Kelly and Ryan, as well as many print articles and reviews. Her book is called Retention Revolution, 7 Surprising and Very Human Ways to Keep Employees Connected to Your Company. And it sets leaders up for success in this new world of work. So this is what we're going to be exploring together. Erica, anything you would like to share by way of your background, personal context before we just dive on in?
No, I'm good. Let's just dive in.
Okay. Well, one of the things I like to ask, this part of this trilogy of books that you've put together that have been so well received, why these books? Why particularly this book now? Why did you feel it was so important to get out there?
So to answer this question, I'll take you back a little bit, a few decades, but I won't make it that long of a story. But in 1998, I was engaged to my now husband, Jeff, and he asked me to go on vacation. I couldn't go because I was saving my vacation days for our honeymoon. But I had just gotten a little 5-inch square device called the BlackBerry, and this device was presumably going to allow me to work from anywhere. So I hopped on a plane, went to Bermuda, sat there and worked during the day with my feet in the sand, had a nice drink in my hand, saw Jeff's clients at night, and literally said to myself out loud, "This is the life." This was unbelievable. Fast forward a decade, 10 years later, I added 3 kids to the mix and added yet another new phone, one of these, an iPhone. Thank you, Steve Jobs. And now I'm walking around with 3 kids and 2 phones, and work and life are increasingly interconnected. And instead of feeling like, "Ooh, wow, I can work from anywhere," now I was actually working from everywhere.
Yeah.
And now we're in 2024, and there's more technology and AI and all of these things that we think about. And I needed to get this out in the world as someone who was always a connector, but began to see the good, the bad, and the ugly as it relates to technology. And so my belief and the through line in these books, this Human Workplace trilogy, is that great leaders, and really could be great humans, parents, all of us with whatever we do with our lives, need to find the sweet spot between tech and connect. We need to leverage technology for its greatness, which we are doing right now on this podcast, but we also need to know where, when, how to put that technology in its place to connect on a deeper level. And there's a pendulum and it keeps swinging, which I know we'll get into, but that was a very personal experience to me that, when I was sitting there, with my 3 kids and the 2 phones and everything changing, I said to myself out loud, "I can't believe this is my life." And it was really the contrast of those 2 moments that led me down this path.
Yeah, well, that is such an interesting contrast. And, we talk about, the terms get thrown around: work-life balance, work-life integration, life-work harmony. That's the one I like, by the way. Whatever term you use, the reality is it's tough because it all just gets mushed together, doesn't it? We like to talk about those terms because I think we have this notion that maybe we can keep them separate, but the reality for most of us is they just get mushed together. We're expected to be on all the time. We're expected to be connected all the time. And if you start to set up boundaries, a lot of times your boss gets upset. There's so many examples of, people setting up completely realistic boundaries, where all of a sudden that gets them in the doghouse with their boss, with their work, whether they're explicitly harmed by it, or if it just like kind of sets them behind when the next promotion opportunity for promotion comes up or whatever. There's just so many examples of that. I there's some really great funny guys that I follow on TikTok, for example, that all they do is they just review employee complaints, and they just review like horrible bosses basically, and employee complaints, and they're just like, oh, this guy's a jerk, this guy's a jerk, and it is, it's just like mind-boggling how idiotic and people can be. um and we all look at that and we laugh at it and we like to commiserate together. But the reality is, bosses do those things over and over and over again. Organizations do those things over and over and over again. And I don't think most bosses get up in the morning thinking, I'm going to be a jerk today. I'm going to screw over my people today. I'm going to exploit my team today. Like, most people get up wanting to do right by others. They want to treat people well. So it's not
Right.
like
But I would say they're
nefarious.
overwhelmed, right? But they're
They're
overwhelmed
overwhelmed.
and
Yeah.
they're exhausted
Yeah.
and they don't have a roadmap. I mean, I agree with you, but one of the things I often say is left to our own devices, pun intended, we're often not connecting. And the key thing that leaders need to do is be intentional. And the good news is it's not rocket science, but that
Yeah.
also doesn't make it easy. And so what I am very focused on right now in this 5+ years or almost 5 years
Yeah.
post pandemic, when everything we know about, mostly knowledge workers changed overnight, how do we bring that intentionality to the forefront? And I want to give leaders a roadmap for how to do that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that roadmap. Again, assuming, and I really do have the assumption that most bosses, most leaders really do have good intention. They want to
Great.
treat others well, right? And then there's every now and then there's the rare person that's just a jerk. But for the most part, people want to treat people well. So it's the lack of skill, it's the lack of know-how, or it's the overwhelm. So how do we set up that roadmap?
Right. Well, first, I think we need to remember that many times when people start to become managers and leaders, they don't get, I mean, some astronomical number of leaders literally get zero training, number one. Number
Yeah.
two, there's the classic, you're the great salesperson, and then you sell so much, you get promoted to sales manager, and you actually don't like managing people, you're not good at managing people, and you don't get the training. It's the trifecta. And so I agree, we should come to this with, through the lens of positive intent. So the way that I think about how to lead in this moment, there's three things that I think about, and it's all about being intentional about connection. So the first is, we can take them in whatever order you want, but great human leaders connect people to purpose. Um,
Hmm.
Great human leaders connect people to each other in real life and virtually. And great human leaders connect people to themselves. And that third bucket really is about professional development and helping people grow. So the first one, connecting people to purpose, one of my favorite stories, slash maybe it's an urban myth, but I don't really care because I like it anyway, is the story of when JFK went into NASA in 1962. And he walked in, and the first person he saw was a guy holding a broom. It was a janitor. And he said to the janitor, well, what do you do? And the janitor said, hello, Mr. President, I'm putting a man on the moon. And the
Hmm.
janitor was right. Every single person in that building was putting a man on the moon in some way, shape, or form. But most people in our organizations really don't know how what they do connects to that bigger
Yeah.
mission. And that's a huge thing when we think about employee satisfaction, employee engagement, especially when we talk about Generation Z. And we all want to feel connected to purpose, but Gen Z, and they're taking over
Yeah.
the workplace, they will leave if they don't have it. And so great human leaders connect those dots and they take the time to say, how is the customer service rep or the computer programmer, what are they doing to impact that mission? So that's the first part. The second piece is great human leaders connect people to each other. And, if I don't know where you'll go with your questions, and we can certainly talk about how many days people should or shouldn't be in the office, but I believe, irrespective, there's not one right answer. But what I would say is that whatever the answer, whatever the schedule or whatever the setup you have in terms of your days in the office, we need to be more intentional about how people come together.
Yeah.
Because, and I love this, the absence of intentionality is a recipe for resentment, right? The absence of intentionality is a recipe for resentment. And what I mean by that is we've all been in situations where we commute into an office and it's empty or only half our team is there and we're doing the same kind of work that we could be doing from home in our PJs. And I'd be resentful. And
Yeah.
so great human leaders, again, they're not bad people, as you say, but they're thinking to themselves, okay, when we come in, what is the kind of work that we're doing on the days that we're in the office? And in the book, I share a framework that's called the 3 Ps of intentionality. Purpose, what is the purpose of the meetings when we come together? Protocols, do we have to be in? Maybe there are certain meetings that just aren't hybrid, that, what, if you can't make it in that day, AI takes notes for you and you just miss it. And certain meetings are only virtual. So what are those protocols? And the last P is present, being present. And once you set up those protocols, leaders need to do everything they could do in their ability to be present. And the last piece is that great human leaders connect people to themselves. And that piece is all about people want to grow on the job, up, down, and sideways. And you and your world that you're in, you probably know this more than most people, that organizations are flatter. There aren't as many rungs in that ladder to grow. So we need to be more creative about how to move people around organizations. And so great human leaders in this moment know, especially back to Gen Z, if they don't feel like they're growing on the job, they will leave to go somewhere else. And so we need to think about, I think, instead of a ladder, think about it in terms of lily pads. How can you people hopping
Mm.
around and gaining new skills? Because if leaders support their employees in ways that work for their employees are much more likely to show up in ways that support the company. So that was a very long answer to your question. Happy to dive into any of them, but if leaders are listening to this and they're exhausted and they're stressed, which I know most people are, I would say focus in on these 3 things.
Yeah, oh, I mean, there's so much there. Let's
No,
let's let's
sorry.
start off with the purpose piece and then move to the intentionality piece.
Okay.
You're absolutely right. Purpose matters so much, especially for younger people. It matters for everybody. Everyone
Yep.
wants to have purpose, right? But particularly for younger workers, younger millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, as they get into the workforce, they're going to want purpose too. They're not, we just can't take it for granted that they're just going to show up and just do menial work that isn't connected to something bigger, right? And again, I'm a Zennial. I'm like that in between Gen X and Millennial
You're
cohort
younger
kind
than
of
I
group.
am.
I'm just right in between there, and so I relate to both. But really, I kind of relate more to millennial myself, and you know, I guess it always baffles me when I hear about people when I hear people kind of poo-poo millennials and just say, oh, they're entitled and whatever. I'm like, maybe they just expect more, like maybe they just expect like what good leadership looks like. Maybe they just expect, like I'm a professor. When I teach students what it means to be a good coach and a good mentor and a good leader and like what a good organization looks like and how a good team runs. If I go into a workplace and expect to see that and I don't see that and then I'm dissatisfied, is that my fault? I don't know. Like I think of course we need to have patience and we need to have grace towards people who, like you said, aren't always trained in the roles that they're thrust
Yeah.
into. We need to have patience and grace for that. But I also think we need to up our game. Like leaders need to up their game and be willing to improve and not just kind of shoot the messenger, so to speak. And it
Let's hope they
largely
don't do that because I'm the messenger.
largely we just need to lean on that purpose piece. It's a really easy piece too, because it doesn't cost anything. Like
Mm-mm.
you said with the example, maybe it's apocryphal or not, I don't know, but like the broom sweeper guy, it takes nothing for to help him recognize his broader purpose in helping to send someone to the moon. It
Yeah.
takes nothing. Like I worked in, this was years ago, another lifetime ago. Like I was going off to college. The summer before I'm going to college, I'm saving up money to be able to pay for tuition, right? And I'm working in a factory job, crummy job, hot, sweaty, poor air circulation, repetitive work. It's a crummy job. The only reason I'm doing it is because it's the best paying job I can get.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to save up money to go to college. And it's literally, I want to save up money so I don't, and I'm not looking back and I'm going to college and I never want to do that job again. And no shade to anybody who works in a factory, right? But that's not what I wanted to do. And I was putting my head down working so I never would have to do it again. Yeah, I couldn't help but look at what I was doing and ways that that job could have been improved, and low cost or no cost ways that that job could have been improved to make it more meaningful, to make it more variety, more purpose driven, in just small little ways
Yeah.
that could have made at least marginal difference in
Yeah.
my experience and in the difference of everyone else around me. And that was for like a pretty overall crummy, um, labor intensive factory job.
Right.
If you can do it for a sweeper, if you can do it for a factory job, if you can do it for any sort of blue collar labor type of work, you can do it for any job. You can make any job purpose driven if
You
you just
can.
have a modicum of like creativity
Yeah. And
and
intentionality.
and intentionality behind it, and just spend a little bit of time thinking about it and helping people connect to their why and their purpose behind it.
I was just
And
trying to
it,
find there was so in my book, in each of in each chapter I highlight great human leaders, like people who are doing this really well. And I was just going to share this with you. So I interviewed David Siegel, who is the CEO of Meetup, or now he recently left. He was also the CEO of Investopedia.
mm,
And one of the things that he does, every single person that joins the organization, he sends them a personal email welcoming them to the company. And I
yeah.
thought, wow, that's great. Like I'd be psyched to get that. And if the story stopped there, great. He then goes on and in this note, he specifically maps out how their role connects to the larger mission. So I'm going to just read
Nice.
you this. It's very short, but this is an actual email that he sent to an employee. He writes, I was so excited to hear the great news that you will be joining Meetup. Have heard such great feedback from E and H and others about you. Program management and ensuring great operations will elevate all of our product team efforts and drive meaningful impact. It is such a critical role. Take care and see you in August. David. I mean, the CEO. So again, to your point, it's creativity, or it's literally just being intentional, saying, I am going to connect the dots. I'm going to take 5 minutes, 10 minutes. It's, again, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, and it literally takes a few minutes, right?
Yeah.
And it makes all the difference in the world, to do that. So let's pivot then, because that
Right.
we're already moving into intentionality. So you're connecting purpose through intentionality. That
Mhm.
intentionality piece connects to things like back to office mandates, or whether you have hybrid or remote options. It can connect to all sorts of things, but having that intentionality component into how we lead, it really matters in the modern workforce. And when we're talking about knowledge workers, there's studies out of Harvard, MIT, multiple places. It talks about the heavy cognitive load type of work that knowledge workers do the reality is that most people really can only do a few hours of that heavy cognitive load work a day. Now, a lot of us end up spending tons of time in meetings. We end up doing a lot of low cognitive load work, because we just end up doing a lot of repetitive stuff. We end up doing a lot of kind of pointless meetings. We end up doing a lot of stuff that doesn't probably matter all that much. It begs the question, why? Like what, we're doing a lot of stuff that's really not all that productive. But we also, if we look at AI, if we look at advanced robotics, if we look at like all this stuff that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, a lot of that stuff's going to get displaced. Like we're going to have AI that's going to be able to do a lot of that repetitive stuff. It's going to free up our time to do mostly the heavy cognitive load stuff, right? But there's only so much we can do. Like as human beings, our capacity to do heavy cognitive load work is really maximized at like a few hours a day. So, like, what does intentionality look like in the modern workplace, in the future of work? Like, what's your perspective on that?
To me, intentionality is, as I was saying, is not coming into the office and having half your team there and sitting on Zoom all day.
Yeah.
So intentionality is the opposite of that. A lot of companies right now are struggling with this, thinking about the continuum from magnet to mandate. We are going to come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're going to serve lunch and we're going to have more people here in hopes that people decide that they want to come in. And what I've seen recently is more and more companies realizing that, again, every company is different, and this doesn't work if no one is co-located. But if you have people that all live in or around a hub, I'm seeing the pendulum swing a little bit to the mandate. Again, not 5 days a week, not even necessarily 4 days a week, but it goes back to left to our own devices, that if we do have people in on the same day, we don't need to create things for them to do all day on those days. But, there's an in-person all hands, there's a professional development moment. Maybe once a month we do our work around giving back and our purpose-driven charitable work, or ERGs, or leadership, whatever that is. And so that's the intentionality. And then it's saying, you know what, on the days that we're not in the office, definitely spend more time doing some of that heads down work, because on the days that we're together, even just the social aspect, that is part of the work. Because we know that when
Yeah.
you have a best friend at work, I mean, all of those Gallup studies that and then the last thing I'll say is a lot of my work is inspired by a study out of Cornell by a guy named Kevin Niffen. And Kevin was studying what makes one team higher performing than another team. And his dad was a firefighter. And so he grew up hanging out with firefighters. That's, how he spent his childhood. And so he decided to study them. And the very short version of what he found is that the firefighters who are the most dedicated to the ritual of the firehouse meal, of sitting around the table
Mm,
connecting as humans, they actually saved more lives. So that
mm,
there is a correlation between human connection and performance. And
yeah.
again, whether you pick magnet or whether you pick mandate or whatever it is, it could be once a month. I mean, I believe this intentionality can happen if you're in the office 3 days a week, 3 days a month, or 3 days a year, but it will not happen without a tremendous amount of intentionality and some planning. And one last thing I'll say, this shows I'm not a mix of a millennial and a Gen X, or I'm full on Gen X, which shows my age. But being someone in her mid 50s, I watched the show called The Love Boat. And on The Love Boat, there was a woman named Julie McCoy, who was the cruise director, and she owned Connection. And that's what I'm also seeing. And I write about in the Retention Revolution, that a lot of these companies that are doing this well don't leave it to chance, and they have somebody in charge of connecting people.
So many great thoughts, and man, there's so much more we could talk about.
Okay, we could talk
I,
all day, right?
I also note the time, and I probably need to let you go. But we could talk all day. But gratefully, there's a book, and people can dive on in and find out so much more. Erica, before we wrap things up for today, I just wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, where they can find your book, and then give us a final word on the topic for today.
Here's the book, The Retention Revolution. Get it where, really any books are sold, on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, local bookstores have it. My website is just my name, ericakeswin.com. You'll see the keynotes that I've been giving around how to be a great human leader in the age of AI. I also just launched something that your listeners might find interesting. I took all the content from these books and I have a cohort of leaders, managers who want to become great human leaders. And so the cohort's full, but I'll be doing 2 different ones in 2025. And those have been really, really fun. And the group bonds, because managers, they need support from other people in those roles because it is stressful, and it can be really, really lonely. And I guess my last word to the listeners would be something that I think about a lot. And look, I like my technology more than the next person, but I will say that the default use of technology degrades connection. And so we can't just default. We need to take that pause and we need to be more intentional, whether it's at work, at home, or really anywhere in between.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much, Erica. It's just been a real
Welcome.
pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Erica can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.